Good morning, all of you. I welcome you all to Ansarkari. So, as always, in this video, we'll be analyzing the newspaper for 7th of February 2023. So, the first article is regarding an elevation of a lawyer as a judge. So, here the main issue in this news is that um, lawyer whose name was recommended by the Supreme Court Collegium to be elevated as judge. Now, a petition has been filed accusing her of hate speech against the minorities. So, the Chief Justice of India, he says that the Collegium came to know about the developments concerning her late only after recommending her for appointment to the Madras High Court. So this issue, it would now be taken up by the Supreme Court. And as we know that a natural disaster, that is earthquake, it hit Turkey and Syria, and it was of around 7.8 magnitude on the Richter scale. So it caused around death of 2,600 people there, and India would be definitely sending the aid. And when we talk about specifically in the context of earthquakes in India, so even India lies in high seismic zone, specifically the northern India. So here the disaster preparedness, firstly, it should be prevention, but in earthquake, it is like almost very impossible or almost difficult to prevent an earthquake. But apart from prevention, it should be then preparation and how do you respond once a disaster has occurred. And when we talk about electing a mayor or choosing a mayor in Delhi, so even after the elections, the political parties have been unsuccessful in appointing a mayor, and this is definitely disrupting and obstructing the governance at the local level. And now, even a national level kabaddi player accuses the coach of rape and blackmail. And a few days ago, we saw that the Olympic medalist and the Indian wrestlers, they have accused the president of the Wrestling Federation of India with similar charges of corruption, of harassment. And so different players from different sports are now coming up and speaking about the issues that they are facing and they're being harassed. Then the concept of open prisons is being followed, and it has been like followed in the state of Rajasthan since 1950s. So we will be like looking at how it is important, what has been the Supreme Court take regarding the open prisons, and like how they have fared. So the open prison model, it was adopted in Rajasthan with the convicts staying on community land without high walls or strict surveillance. So that has promoted a reformative form of punishment, and it succeeded in transforming the lives of the inmates. So right now, Rajasthan has 40 such open camps, such open prisons, and prisoners who have served one-third of their sentences, they are eligible to shift to these open jails. And inmates of the central and district jails with a track record of good conduct, they are regularly identified to make the move to the open prisons. So where they are allowed to live with even their family members and earn their livelihoods. So the trust-based concepts, obviously it is a trust-based concept which was introduced in the state in 1950s. So as minimum security facilities, the open prisons, they require 92% of less staff compared to the closed jails, and the cost incurred per prisoner per month is only rupees 500. So this would be even saving on the cost. And apart from that, the Supreme Court Judge Madan B. Lokur, in 2018 judgment, he said that he had seen a normal life in the open prisons and felt that the rehabilitation of the prisoners would be achieved successfully with employment opportunities made available to them. And while giving liberty and dignity to the prisoners, open prisons, they have the potential to eradicate retributive forms of punishment. And obviously, this is a humanitarian idea where we can say human rights are not violated as far as the prisoners and the inmates are concerned. Then Himachal Pradesh, it is like it has unleashed a plan to become a green energy state of India, and it is in talks with a World Bank for funds. And apart from that, so ग्रीन बॉन्ड का पब्लिक इशू जारी करने वाला इंदौर देश का पहला शहर होने वाला है, एंड ग्रीन बॉन्ड के सारे स्मार्ट you can invest in green bonds, so it is kind of smart investment because जो भी funds you'll be paying after buying the green bond, so that would go in green projects, basically that would help in reducing the carbon emissions. And bond ka mulya is around rupees 1000 per bond, and effective coupon rate is going to be 8.25%. Then Hillary Clinton, she announces a global climate resilience fund, and which is going to be worth $50 million for women to fight climate change. And she would also mark 50 years of Seva as a trade union. So she'll be attending a program which would be celebrating 50 years of Seva as a trade union. Then from the editorial page, this article is talking about passive euthanasia. So here, Supreme Court had granted legal status to the concept of advanced medical directives in 2018, and it allowed passive euthanasia subject to stringent safeguards. But it was seen, and it at that point of time, it was seen as a vital recognition of both the patient autonomy over end of life decisions and the right to a dignified death. So some of these specific directions that were issued back then, they turned out to be insurmountable obstacles in implementing the passive euthanasia or ensuring the right to a dignified death. And recently, Constitution Bench has modified the directions to make them more workable and more simple in manner. So the advanced directive, it no more needs to be countersigned by a judicial magistrate. Instead, it could be attested before a notary or a gazetted officer now. And the original guideline that the executor should name a guardian or a close relative who would be authorized to give consent to refuse or to withdraw the medical treatment in the event of the executor becoming incapable of a decision has been modified to name more than one guardian or a relative. And apart from that, the new guidelines, they require the hospital itself to constitute a primary medical board to certify whether the instructions on refusal or withdrawal of treatment should be carried out. And even now, again, the hospital will be forming a secondary board, which was earlier used to be the responsibility of the district collector. And so the main thing is that apart from these changes here, it becomes important that the parliament comes out with a legislation regarding this, a comprehensive law to deal with this thing. And obviously such guidelines, they are useful and they're necessary to implement the concept of a living will and advanced medical directives. And as I told you, that it is now time for the parliament to come out with a comprehensive law regarding the same subject. Talking about MGNREGA and the issues, so in the recent budget, only 0.2% of the GDP has been allocated, which is the lowest ever to MGNREGA. And World Bank economists, they feel and they estimate that the allocation should be at least 1.6% of the GDP. So you can see the gap. And apart from that, there are complex technical apparatus in this scheme. So there has been a steady centralization of the program architecture, even as the wages for the most states, they remain lower than the minimum agricultural wages. So the wages, they are lower. And apart from that, we are seeing centralization of powers regarding this program, and wage payment delays are there, which still continues. There is evidence that these are caused by, again, inadequate allocations. And so what has received less attention is the case of unmet demand, which is again correlated with inadequate allocation. So this legislation, this law, MGNREGA Act, it is a demand-driven law, and every household must get the work within 15 days of demanding the work, failing which the workers, they're legally entitled to an unemployment allowance. But this demand-driven aspect, it has suffered, and getting work and wages, it is contingent upon the MGNREGA software, which is called the Management Information System. So this system is being used in a way to suppress the work demand, and that is, we can say, these are different issues in this program. Talking about the economic crisis in Pakistan, so we'll be looking at what are the different economic factors and variables which like one must look when we are talking about an economy of a country. So right now we are seeing that there is widespread blackouts. Like obviously there is not sufficient amount of energy being generated. There is runaway inflation, which is also known as hyperinflation. There's depreciating currency. There's plummeting forex reserves. So all of these things are happening at the same time in Pakistan. And when we understand all these variables with the help of graph and the data, so firstly, when we have a look at the inflation rate, so you can see how steeply the curve is increasing for rural food CPI and for the urban food CPI. Then you can also have a look at the general CPI. Apart from that, having a look at the net forex reserves, so you can see how sharply they have depleted. Apart from that, the value of imports is increasing because obviously the currency is depreciating, so that makes the imports expensive, and the value of exports, it is not increasing so sharply. And expenditure as a percentage of GDP, you can see it is increasing, and revenue as a percentage of GDP is declining. And basically these both these things are moving in opposite directions. And apart from that, the share of total debt as a percentage of GDP in Pakistan is at around 89%, which is really very high. So all these things are there, and definitely it is pointing towards a huge economic crisis that is there. So Assam records 17% teenage pregnancy in 2022, and the Assam state, it is also like it has been now taking steps to ensure that child marriages are not happening there. And apart from that, people who've already like were into child marriage, so they are now being caught under the POXO Act, and like this is being dealt into very seriously by the Chief Minister of Assam also. And talking about the state of ethnic democracy in Malaysia, recently there was 15th general election in November 2022 there, which were like putting an end to the volatile political situation in the region. And the election, it delivered the first hung parliament of the country, as none of the existing political coalitions, they secured a single majority. And talking about what the different political parties over there, so the unity government led by the Alliance of Hope under the premiership of Mr. Anwar Ibrahim, he formed the government. However, like it is still short of the majority with its 82 seats. And apart from that, the constitutional democracy model it adopted by the Malaysia, it was successful up until 1969. And after that, the unprecedented racial rights in 1969, the Barisan National embarked upon a model of politics to promote only the Malay rights, so the rights of only the Malaysian people. So this was unleashed by the UMNO, which had a hegemonic political position there in the ruling BN coalition. So it used the Malaysian state as an apparatus to institutionalize Malay dominance, Malay language, Islam, and Malay culture in the public sphere. So, however, by pursuing the pro-Malay public policies, the UMNO, it has severely damaged the social fabric of Malaysia, and the unveiling of a cumulative marginalization facilitated the escalation of an ethnic uprising in Malaysia. Then we'll understand about the voice deepfakes. However, in one of the videos, we have talked about what are deepfakes. So in simpler terms, we can understand that voice deepfakes are kind of voice cloning, and we'll be looking at what can be the potential threats around the artificial speech. So firstly, what do we mean by voice deepfakes? So it is closely it like when you mimic a real person's voice. So that is what is exactly a voice deepfake is. You are mimicking someone else's voice, and then you are further misusing it to meet your own vested interests. So the voice, it can accurately replicate the tonality, the accents, the cadence, and other unique characteristics. And how are these created? So that definitely needs high-end computers with powerful graphic cards. And besides specialized tools and software, generating deepfakes, it needs training data to be fed to the artificial intelligence model. So that is one of the, we can say, potential threats out of the artificial intelligence technology. And Artificial intelligence can use this data to render an authentic sounding voice, which can then be used to say anything. So basically, you can use it for anything if you have access to such a technology. And so, what are the threats arising from the use of such voice deepfakes? So, using such technology to defraud the users, steal their identity, to engage in various other illegal activities like phone scams and posting fake videos on social media platforms can be their potential misuse. And voice deepfakes, if they're used in filmmaking, so that has raised ethical concerns about the use of such technology, because you're using someone else's voice to speak something which that person has actually not said. So that raises the ethical concerns. And what are the ways to detect such deepfakes? So detecting them is like, again, at the same time, it requires high advanced technology, software, and hardware to break down the speech patterns. And research labs, they use watermarks and blockchain technologies to detect the deepfake technology, but the tech designed to outsmart the deepfake detectors, that is constantly evolving, and that is the major challenge. Then regarding Tripura, so a political party, it is basically, he's like the main leader of that political party is seeking a greater Tripura land, that is Greater Tripura, within the constitutional framework of the country. And Tripura Motha Party's policy is not to divide the state and that nobody will be discriminated against. So we know that when we talk about Nagaland, so they demand for Greater Nagaland. So specifically in the northeastern India, we have such demands for a separate state. Talking about Russia, India, and China. So the Russian envoy calls for normalization of India-China relations. So the sooner there is normalization in India and China relations, the better it is for the world. And a weaker Pakistan would not be better for the region, be it India or Afghanistan. And Russia would not do anything detrimental to India in its relations with Islamabad. And the Russian ambassador to India, he also acknowledged that India-Russia ties, they have been under stress for some time in terms of economic ties, which had accelerated since last year due to the tectonic geopolitical shifts in Europe, referring to the war in Ukraine. However, India has been like benefiting out of the imports of the crude oil from Russia, which we are like having access to at discounted price. Apart from that, Russia has also supplied us and provided us with S-400 missile system. So that is there. And regarding hate speech, so the Supreme Court says that if you ignore the hate crime, it will come on to you one day. So this is a serious issue that cannot be ignored. And there's no space for a crime on the basis of religion in a secular country. It is the obligation of the state to protect a person irrespective of religion or creed. But if you have a climate which fosters hate, when you do not discourage it, where you kind of encourage it, if you're not discouraging it, so in a way you are encouraging it indirectly, then it becomes a very serious thing. And the state acknowledges, so the first or the one step solution, or we can say the first step towards solving the hate crime issue, is firstly acknowledging the problem that there exists this problem of hate speech and hate crime on the basis of religion. So be it minority or majority, there are certain rights inherent in a human being. And definitely practicing your religion is one of the fundamental rights in the Indian Constitution, the freedom to religion. Then recently, INS Vikrant, which is India's first indigenous aircraft carrier, was commissioned, and the Navy's LCA, that is Light Combat Aircraft, lands on it for the very first time. And that is there in the picture also. You can see it landing on the INS Vikrant. Apart from that, talking about green energy and India's transition towards green energy, yesterday we talked in detail about what is a just energy transition. And the main point was that with energy transition, energy security is the key thing. So here, obviously, this area, this sector would also be offering investment opportunities to the private firms so they can come forward. And apart from that, like recently, our Prime Minister inaugurated the India Energy Week. So India's energy demand is also, it will be doubling up by 2030. Currently, it is at 5%. So it is expected it would be going up till 11% of the global demand. So this offers opportunity for energy companies to invest in and collaborate with the energy firms in the country. So we have different missions and schemes going on for that. We have one, the most important one is the National Green Hydrogen Mission. And government has set aside rupees 1 lakh crores for that, for green hydrogen. And the country, it was taking the lead in green hydrogen space and would replace the gray hydrogen. So gray hydrogen, basically, it is created from the natural gas or methane using steam methane reformation, but without capturing the greenhouse gases that are generated in the process. So that is why it is not completely green, and hence the name gray hydrogen. And domestic exploration of the fuels and an increase in the production of such fuels was one of the focus areas also. Coming to the world news, so as we were talking about, there was an earthquake in Turkey and Syria. So India is going to send the disaster relief teams to these countries that would be involving the National Disaster Response Force, and medical professionals would be sent immediately along with trained dog squads. Then we'll be sending relief materials to these countries as well, which would be including food materials. So India has always come forward in such calamities, in such situations, to support the countries in any which way possible. Coming to the business page, so firstly, as we were talking about, that India is taking the benefit of importing the crude oil from Russia. Earlier, our share was only 1%, and it has now increased up till 28%, which is huge. So we are taking advantage of the discounted crude oil that is available to India being sold off by Russia, given the Russia-Ukraine war that is going on, and there was a price cap which was put on the Russian oil by the Western countries, by Europe. So that is there. And so Fed rate hike, it fears the fuel, it fears fuel rupee's worst days. So basically, as I told you yesterday itself, that when there is suppose rate hike by any country's central bank, so obviously investors feel that it is comfortable for them, it is more safer for them to invest in that particular country because the interest rate has now been increased. So they would be withdrawing their investments from the Indian markets, and that is what we call as capital outflows. So with huge amount of capital outflows that was witnessed in January 2023, that would have added to the pressure on the Indian rupee. And as you can see that today itself, it has been reported that our rupee, it is depreciated to 82.7250 per dollar. So it fell by 1%. And Adani promoters, they have prepaid a loan worth of, basically debt worth of dollar 1,114 millions to release their shares. And this is one of the measures taken by the Adani group to reassure their investors, because obviously we were just seeing free fall in these stocks of the Adani group of companies. But now we are seeing that from a day or two, their stocks, they are again bouncing back. So situation is still volatile. It would be better if we stay away from such stocks. So that's all for today. Thank you for joining in Sarkari. You'll get the PDF link in the description box. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share this video as much as possible. Thank you so much for joining us.